It's time for the Bucs Mock Draft. This is a new thing we are doing this year where we are going to be breaking down Scott Smith and Carmen Vitale's mock drafts that they are doing on the Buccaneers website. This first one, Scott gets to be my guest. Next week, we'll have Carmen talking about hers. And this is going to be really interesting. I know you guys have kind of had a few different rules for these first few mock drafts you're doing. And the one that we're going to be breaking down today does, in fact, have trades in it.
Yeah, we didn't include trades in our very first editions for each of us, but we are going to do them if we want to from now on. And I did have 4 trades in this draft. The first 3, unsurprisingly, were for teams trading up to get quarterbacks. So that's generally what causes trades in the top 10. And other interesting things about this first draft here that we're doing is that 8 of the first 10 players were offensive players, which is really good for teams in the middle of the draft who are hoping to get like the top edge rusher or the top linebacker, things like that. Then you see a run on edge rushers later in the draft, and you'll see at the end of this that the Bucs went for some defensive help up front.
Okay, I like the teases there, setting this up. So we're going to break this down into groups of 8 because obviously going through all 32 at once would be a little challenging. So this first grouping that we are going to do, these first 8 picks, already we're going to see some of the trades, and it looks like it is some teams that Bucs fans are a little familiar with.
Yeah, you don't normally see, I guess you don't think of teams in the same division trading with each other, but if it helps both of them, why not? You'll see here in the first 8 picks, my first trade up is Carolina trading with Atlanta to get up to 4 to make sure they can get the quarterback they want, which is Justin Fields. And you see there that 3 of the first 4 picks are quarterbacks. I think everybody believes that the quarterbacks are really going to drive what happens in the first 15 picks of this draft. Also, I think you'll see there the Dolphins, I gave them Jamar Chase with the 3rd pick, the first pick that's not a quarterback. I personally feel that while a lot of people are putting Devontae Smith first, by the time we get to the draft, I think Jamar Chase is probably going to be considered the consensus number 1 pick.
Interesting. Yeah, that's going to be very interesting. All right, so our second segment, we got our next 8 players that you have being taken. And man, this QB rush does not stop with those first 8 picks, huh?
Yeah, San Francisco trades up to number 9 with Denver. That's a 4-pick trade. You can read about this and how the teams make a trade happen in my mock draft on the website, but I won't get into the details of it. But San Francisco trades up to get Trey Lance. I think that's a guy that they could probably go with Jimmy Garoppolo 1 more year and then let this guy develop because he's a little bit more of a raw prospect. Also, I think you're going to see here the first 2 linebackers that go, Parsons and Owusu Karamoa. I think a lot of teams are going to be very interested in those players. I'm not sure if it'll drive any trades, but those are 2 really good do-everything linebackers that a lot of teams would like to have on their team. And then finally, at the end of the segment, you see the very first edge rusher from Miami there, Gregory Rousseau, and that is very late for the first edge rushers, but there's just no Joey Bosa type of player in this year's draft.
So looking at these first 16 picks, if this is how it goes, what do you think that would mean for the Buccaneers in terms of how beneficial or not? Is this how the Bucs would want the first 16 picks to go?
Well, any team that isn't actively trying to get a quarterback in the first round is going to like that 5 of them go. So that's good. And it is pushing defensive players down the board. We're not going to really know if the Buccaneers have a single position that is much more important than the rest until we see what happens in free agency. You know, if you lose Ndamukong Suh, Levante David, Shaq Barrett, Chris Godwin, if you lose any one of those players, that immediately becomes a bigger need. So it's a little hard to say at the moment.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so now let's pull up our third segment, the next 8 players, and I'm still loving that we have not gotten to the Bucs pick yet. This is where we just remember that it's lovely because they're picking last, because they won a Super Bowl. Had to throw that in there. So, yes. All right, this third segment of players, we just talked about that first edge rusher had finally gone at 16. Well, now that starts the next run, that those quarterbacks start a run there. It looks like you have it where this means that all of a sudden everyone who needs an edge rusher starts getting nervous.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of agreement in what order these edge rushers are going to go, because like I said, there isn't just 1 or 2. There's not a Josh Allen. There's not a Myles Garrett. There isn't just 1 or 2 guys that are clearly head and shoulders above the rest of a fully formed pass rusher. A lot of them are guys that they're projecting to be good pass rushers. You know, the Gregory Rousseau from the last segment, for instance, didn't even play last year. So you see a bit of a run on them here. It's hard to say the order that they're going to go, but if the Bucs are hoping to get a pass rusher, this part of the draft is not great for them because they're starting to all come off the board right here.
Right, and you have your first running back finally on the board here.
Yeah, and you know, It's going to be good value because I think both Najee Harris and another player we're going to see in the next segment are very good running backs that can be 3-down running backs in the NFL. And I just don't think a lot of teams are targeting that early in the draft. So some teams are going to probably get some pretty good value here with those guys.
Okay, now we pull up our final segment of this first round that includes the Bucs pick, obviously. And, this is your second mock draft. At this point, Carmen has only done one. That's what she'll be going next week with her second one. But I know that you have already shaken things up a little bit from what you had in your first version.
Well, a little bit. I didn't actually come off my idea, which is that they would target a defensive lineman with the 32nd pick. A down lineman. There's a possibility that Ndamukong Suh isn't back. But even if he is, that's a player that's been playing on one-year contracts for a while. And the Bucs have 3 defensive linemen, actually, with Rakeem Nunez-Roches and Steve McClendon, also free agents or potential free agents on March 17th. So if you're guessing a position where there might be need, that's the one I'm guessing. In the first one, I gave them the defensive lineman from Iowa, Davion Nixon, but in this case, the way my mock draft fell out this time is that a guy that had been off the board before, Levi Onwuzurike, we're all going to have to learn to say that if they draft him.
Say that 3 times fast for me.
Levi Onwuzurike. I actually looked it up and practiced for a while, so I think I have that right. If the Bucs do draft him, we're all going to have to learn how to say that. But that's the guy. He's from Washington, so we've had a good recent history with Washington defensive linemen. But so I gave them the same position, but a different player this time.
And man, you've got Miami making some moves here.
Yeah, so Miami, if this happens, would end up with 3 first-round picks. And, they have a lot of early picks, and that doesn't mean you have to stay put and pick them all where you pick them. You can use them to move around a little bit. And they got a receiver first, and then they got, I believe I gave them a linebacker in the second. And then they still make a dramatic move to move up from 36 to 31, which, by the way, is the exact trade that the Buccaneers made to get Doug Martin in 2012, 36 to 31. And basically all it cost them was a swap of 4th-round picks. This time I'm saying Miami has to pay off a 4th-round pick, but that's well worth it to get a running back, Travis Etienne, that I think is going to be a fantastic NFL player.
Yeah, and last thing here, as much as you had all the quarterbacks just getting snatched up really early, this back half of the first round, you very much have the defense dominating it. And again, if that is the case, how does that potentially affect what you see the Buccaneers doing?
Well, I think that's a good thing for the Buccaneers. I mean, we said the run on edge rushers could be a negative for them, but there are a lot of good defensive players there. I didn't have a defensive lineman come off the board till 29th pick to Green Bay. So that could be a very good thing for the Buccaneers if it falls that way.
All right, well, that is going to do it for us on this first Bucs mock draft video. Again, we're going to be doing these every week leading up to the draft, alternating between Scott's draft and Carmen's draft. So make sure you tune in next week to see what Carmen has to say and where they agree and disagree.